NASCAR trial, day number 8. We wrapped up with Jim France on Wednesday morning. The NASCAR Vice President of Innovation and Racing Development, John Probst, took to the stand. He talked Gen 7, the pricing around that, a spec Gen 6 car, as well as the infamous internet charge that 2311 Racing pays for on pit road. We'll get to some more of that. Then NASCAR CFO Greg Motto got onto the stand, and they finished the day off with an economist as well. Plus, we'll talk about the top 10 selling diecast for a Lionel in 2025. Welcome back to Break Hard. I'm Matt. NASCAR trial, day number 8 is here. We're hoping to have this wrapped up by Friday. It sounds like the plaintiffs, in this case, the teams, they're done. They've rested their case. They're ready for closing arguments whenever the NASCAR side of things, the defense gets done. Defense on Tuesday night told the judge that they had 16 more witnesses to call to the stand. They've streamlined that list. They say they will also be done by Friday now, which is a really good thing for, one, all of us, but also for the jury, who I assume is just massively fatigued at this point. But this will carry on into a third week, into next week, because I would expect we have closing arguments and deliberations on Monday, Tuesday, sometime around there. But we got started off with Jim France finishing up his testimony on Wednesday morning. He was being questioned by NASCAR's legal counsel, and nothing really revolutionary came out of it. They asked him why he was so against permanent charters, and he said he didn't want to make a promise that he couldn't keep. Essentially, he's concerned about the media rights and the money that would go into that. Potentially could go down, potentially could go up. He doesn't want to be tied into something where he might not be able to pay teams as much as it could, or maybe he would have to pay them more. Just doesn't want to do permanent charters. He's been vehemently against it. Okay, fine. He also said he does business the way his parents taught him. Pay your bills, treat people right, that kind of stuff. All things we had heard. Also mentioned that his IMSA team, Action Express, some years it makes money, some years it doesn't make money, but he loves racing, so he's just going to keep paying the bills regardless. All right, fine. Nothing revolutionary came out of Jim France. Didn't really expect it to, but it is what it is. Then we get into John Probst, NASCAR's Vice President of Innovation and Racing Development. And Probst says he's been around for a while. Like, he was at Chip Ganassi Racing. He was part of the IRL kart days. He was over at Red Bull Racing when they were into NASCAR. I mean, heck, even the Ganassi secret tunnel in the mountain came up as well when they were talking about wind tunnel time. So Probst has been around. And when I say been around, like when he was at Red Bull, he said today during his testimony that he might get a proactive fine for this, a retroactive fine for it. But he said when they were at Red Bull, he would sometimes enter up to 9 times a year a Cup car into the ARCA race under the guise of being an ARCA car so they could test out Cup Series stuff. And listen, he's definitely not the only one that did that, but I thought it was funny that he sort of admitted to it. So then Probst gets into the Gen 7 car. And obviously there's been a lot of talk around how much the Gen 7 cars cost. It's supposed to be $250,000 or $205,000. Now it's $350,000. Costs have run a little bit over what was anticipated here. And he said that NASCAR spent $14 million developing the Gen 7 car, the next gen car, while noting that teams spent $0 on it. And this is going to be a common theme amongst NASCAR executives, is they're going to continue to talk about how they think that teams can cut money. Basically saying that the teams have expenses that they don't need, and that's more of an issue than not receiving more money from charter payouts. And that's a common theme. And listen, that's their approach to it right now, right? Like, this is a game. They're trying to play to win the game. I can completely understand that. There was some talk when Bob Jenkins was on the stand, owner of Front Row Motorsports, that, when you have an entry into the Cup Series with the Gen 7 car, you have to purchase 7 Gen 7 cars. And Probst said that's not true. The max you can purchase is 7 per entry. So the 34 can have 7 cars in the garage. The 38 can have 7 cars. The 4, 7, you get the gist of it here. And he noted that FRM only bought 6 cars. So there's a lot that went into sort of the back and forth there. Also went down to talk about single source supplied parts for these Gen 7 cars. And he noted that Team Penske, who has won the most championships in the Gen 7 era, spends the least amount of money on repeat parts. Basically, right now what we see are some teams will go out and buy multiples of a certain part, scan them in their shop, they pick the best ones out of them, right? Because there's obviously some quality control issues with some of these single source supply parts. Definitely some more than others based off of some of the things I've seen in person. It was staggering, some of the differences that you can pick out just looking at it. So he said that Penske spends the least amount of money on repeat parts. Meanwhile, he said 2311 Racing spends the most amount of money, which is kind of convenient for the sake of their argument here. And listen, we've heard that, Hendrick Motorsports buys multiple of every part, scans them, picks the best ones, throws them out. That's kind of what we're getting at here. But like I said, their common theme here is to push that the teams are spending more money than they need to. They don't need to spend $20 million a year. They can cut costs by not buying repeat parts. And he goes into it saying that, even their smallest charter team has a regional jet. And he said that these teams have all these fancy $1 million war rooms. They've had these multi-million dollar state-of-the-art shops, saying that maybe they could cut back their spending there and maybe not look to NASCAR to, increase the charter payout. Again, that's what their argument is here. I'm not saying that that's what should happen. I'm just saying that's what the argument is through all of this. So yeah, there was some interesting things, some not so interesting things about the Gen 7 car. A lot of it we already knew. He did talk about the spec Gen 6 car, which was referred to as the Gen 6 Star. It's asterisks after it, which was essentially supposed to be the Gen 6 car with spec parts. Instead of, having to do this full overhaul to get to a Gen 7 car, they were just going to take what they had, make some spec parts for it to cut down on some of the areas that teams were spending a lot of money on. And essentially, when they got their hands on a couple of these cars, from Hendrick, Gibbs, Roush, whoever, they looked at it and they were like, we can't make spec parts for these because all of these cars are different. Doing spec parts is just not going to work out there. So that was basically a non-starter from the beginning. And I get it, right? Like that would have been a really difficult thing to do. And there's things they could have done to, help out with the spec on it. And I know people will be like, you could do spec motors, you could do spec bodies, things like that. Well, they did the spec body thing. People absolutely hated that. Spec motors would really piss off the fan base. And I thought that was interesting because Probst did talk about this. And he said NASCAR did market studies that show fans care about the OEM engine. So whether you have a Chevy engine, a Ford engine, Toyota engine, and the bodies, but they want the teams to race on the track beyond that. So basically the same study told NASCAR that the race could be super compelling in terms of lead changes, but still not be well received if it was an unpopular winner. Think of a Joey Logano versus like a Dale Earnhardt Jr. winning it. Dale Earnhardt Jr. could lead 400 out of 400 laps of the Coke 600, be one of the most boring races you've ever seen, and people would still give it a 90 in the Jeff Gluck poll. It just is what it is. So there's a lot of things that NASCAR looked at apparently in this market study, and they basically said that, or Probst said that NASCAR determined that if fans can see the competition, fans can't see the competition in the wind tunnel. If they can't see it, minimize it. Minimize the team's ability to compete in those areas to reduce costs. So basically, if fans can't see it visually while they're watching the race in person or on the track, well, then we don't need to worry about it. There's an argument to be made there. Me, a person that likes technical things, a person that likes the engineering side of it, yeah, I would like to see them be able to open up some of these areas to innovate in, because I think that is interesting. I think that's good for racing. That's why we like Formula One from like just a pure engineering standpoint. Yeah, I get it. Sometimes the racing isn't very good. I understand that. But from an engineering standpoint, I like to see the directions people are going. Aerodynamics, again, very cool. I understand it from a cost standpoint. Absolutely understand it. So while I say all that, I can still sit back and be like, yeah, I get it here. Then we go on to talk about the internet. The infamous internet that 2311 Racing pays $168,000 to NASCAR for every single year, so they have internet access on pit road. Probst said that NASCAR has 4 tiers of internet access that teams can purchase. He said that 2311 Racing purchases the highest tier. That's how they end up with like a $168,000 bill at the end of last year. He said teams aren't required to use their internet. He said essentially what it came down to is teams used to have satellites set up on their trucks to be able to connect to the internet, to connect back to their shops in Charlotte and everything like that. And when they saw NASCAR running broadband on pit road, they asked, hey, is there any way we can get in on this as well? So NASCAR made it available for them for purchase. Teams aren't required to use it. Teams are allowed to bring Starlinks in. Hendrick Motorsports uses Starlinks on pit road. So it all comes down to kind of personal preference here. So I am kind of glad they cleared that up, because that was definitely a big talking point on last week during this trial. So after Probst got done, then NASCAR CFO Greg Motto got onto the stand. And Motto didn't really shine a ton of light onto things that we didn't already know about, but he said that NASCAR doesn't have the additional money to fund the race teams. Kessler didn't let him have that. Kessler was basically telling him how they could afford to basically pay the teams the $720 million a year that they wanted. That'd be $20 million per chartered entry. Right now, they're only receiving like $12.5-ish million per chartered entry. So yeah, they can definitely seemingly be able to find some of the money there. Then there was a topic of the money that was paid out to the France family. Obviously, the France Family Trust from 2021 to 2024 received $400 million. And Motto says that that was to pay the taxes, the tax disbursement for the France family. And that's written into their contracts, that NASCAR will pay the taxes for Jim France, for Lisa France Kennedy. And that's just how it is. And Kessler asked, does NASCAR pay your taxes? He says, no, they don't. Doesn't have the same type of deal as that. So again, it's a family-run business. They're not the first people to ever do this. They're not going to be the last people to ever do this. Are they like some of the most prominent and one of the more public-facing things to do this? Yeah, sure. I can understand that. But I thought it was interesting that that was brought up and that he entertained the idea. So we also got some charts from NASCAR that show the NASCAR dividends from 21 through 24, NASCAR profit margins, as well as NASCAR's distributions. In the dividend section, you can see right here, contributed capital in millions of dollars. 21, there's 769 million, 863 in 22, 1.24 billion in 23, and 1.23 billion in 2024. Profit dividends, 0 in 2021, 27 million, 37 million, 39 million. So dividend percentage, 3.130 and 3.2%. Okay, fine. Profit margin. NASCAR in millions of dollars, $1.3 million in revenue in 21, 1.5 in 2022, 1.6 in 23, and 1.7 billion in 2024. Operating income in 2024 is $104 million. Profit margin was 6.1%. Okay. I understand this here. Distributions wise, total distributions in 2021, 50 million, 80 million, 159, 107 in 2024. Tax distribution, 50 million, 53, 122, and 68 million in 2024. So again, profit dividends, 39 million in 2024. Okay. So this is where the teams are arguing that NASCAR would be able to pay out the extra money if they wanted to. So then we get sort of the media revenue distributions, which we already knew this about in the previous charter agreement with the 65-25-10, 65 million to the, or 65% to the track, 25% to the teams, 10% to NASCAR. So when you break that down by 2020 numbers, NASCAR Cup Series media brought in $709 million. For the tracks, that means $461 million. Sanction fees takes out $141 million. Total, $320 million, 45%. The teams received $177 million, $91 million in promoter fees, and $7 million in annual contribution. Grand total of $275 million, or 39% of the total pot. Then NASCAR took home $71 million, sanction fees $141 million, promoter fees lose 91, additional contribution lose 7, total of $114 million for 16% of that total pot there. So this is what NASCAR is arguing to be like, hey, yeah, we can't find a way to pay off the rest of it that you guys were talking about here. Like, you're receiving this much money. I think the teams would contend that they're not, that at least under that agreement, they weren't receiving 39%. They were probably receiving lower, maybe around 35 to 32%. At least that's been their argument in the past. Either way, it is a heavy number day, which means that on Thursday, I'll probably have a bit of a more in-depth look at it if we get some more information out of it. NASCAR had like 50 slides up, and that's a lot to go through because I'm not a lawyer and this isn't my full-time job, but if there is anything interesting in it, I will talk about that, of course. So day number 9 on Thursday will roll on. Not sure who we're going to get on the stand there. Obviously, like I said, both sides say they'll be done by Friday. The plaintiff side, the team side, is already done with their witness list. So now we're kind of going through NASCAR's witness list. Interesting to see if any owners show up on NASCAR's witness list and come and speak on behalf of NASCAR and the positives that they see out of the Gen 7 car, out of the charter agreement. That would certainly be interesting. Might be intriguing to the jury as well. All right, let's talk about the top 10 selling diecast per Lionel for the 2025 season. Listen, it was a podium sweep for Junior Motorsports. It was. I know it's not that big of a shock to anybody out there, but number 1 on our list is Justin Allgaier, that Traveler Whiskey, number 40 Chevrolet that he raced in the Daytona 500. He made one start in the Cup Series in 2025, and he sold probably more merch than just about every other driver out there, not named Kyle Larson, Ryan Blaney, or Chase Elliott at this point. They sold so much of that Traveler Whiskey merch, and the diecast, number 1 on the board. It's going to come back around, though. Number 2 on the board, Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s Budweiser Speedway Classic late model Chevrolet. So it's the one that looked like the All-Star Game throwback that he won at Daytona in the spring or in the summer race with. That on the late model stock car. That was number 2 on the list. Number 3 on the list, Justin Allgaier, back on the list again. 2 of the top 3 spots, the raced version of that number 40 Traveler Whiskey car. Fantastic race version. Might have to get my hands on it. I don't really buy diecasts anymore, but that is definitely a good one there. Number 4, Chase Elliott, his Atlanta win diecast. Not a shock, home race win for him. Definitely one of the better strategic moves I think I've seen at the end of a race. masterclass by Chase Elliott in the closing laps of that race. Number 5, William Byron, his Daytona 500 win car. Listen, he was running 7th. All hell broke loose in front of him. He wins his second Daytona 500, goes back to back. Number 5 on the list. Number 6, Kyle Larson's championship car. The one that just says like NASCAR Cup Series champion on the roof. I mean, even Logano made it in the top 10 last year because of it. Number 7 on the list, Kyle Larson's Phoenix raced version car. Didn't win the race, but won the championship, gets a race version out of it. Number 8, Connor Zilich's Red Bull Chevrolet. No shock there. People love those Red Bull cars, hoping that maybe they'll continue to gain their value like those old Brian Vickers Toyota Red Bull cars do. Number 9, Josh Berry, his Las Vegas win from back in the springtime when he took that number 21 to victory lane. Yeah, that one's number 9. I love that. I love the fact that people supported it. Super popular win. Then number 10 on the list, Shane Van Gisbergen and his Red Bull Chevrolet. Again, people are really hoping these Red Bull cars continue to go up in value. Also, not a shock to see both Zilich and SVG up there, 2 very popular up-and-coming drivers, at least in terms of Cup Series terms. Lately. So let me know in the comments what you thought about what Jim France said, John Probst said, Greg Motto. I keep wanting to say Greg Moffitt. I know that's not right. Greg Motto, as well as the top 10 diecast list. Leave your comments. Let me know what you think. Like and subscribe to the channel. Follow me on TikTok @BreakHard, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook @BreakHardBlog.